You came in as a CEO of this digital marketing company. Is that how would you call it?
So we're calling it a compound marketing engine, which is a fancy way of saying we sit on top of a data cloud.
Yeah.
So allowing data, first-party data,
Yep.
to be ingested into the cloud, and then you do stuff with it in a very thoughtful way. So we have a lot of baseball teams, professional sports teams use us to engage with their fans,
Yeah.
with their corporate sponsors. Google's a big customer. We're just fortunate to win a business called Albertsons, which is a large grocery chain.
I see.
It's really fun. But I got to know the founders of this when I was back at Google. They were just this incredibly young, entrepreneurial, scrappy folks, and I've advised them, invested in them, and then became a board member, and then they tapped me to run it, which wasn't what I initially expected, but I'm really honored to do it.
You were heading Google Canada, right?
This was when I was back in the United States, but I did have a time when I was up in Canada with Google. Yeah.
For context, you at some point, if I remember right, you were also Google X on the operations side, running operations there as well.
Yeah, that's right. So after I spent 3 or 4 years up in Canada with Google, I came back to Google X. Was working mostly with the wearables. So a lot of what we see in the market today, the Meta glasses, like I literally did that deal with Luxottica as one thing, but I was really fortunate to work there. It's such a great talent magnet, incredible researchers, academics, like all sorts of people.
Because that's where it started from, right?
It's like we have these moonshot ideas. Can we monetize them? But they were often in close ties with academic institutions.
Yeah.
Stanford was an obvious one, but not just Stanford.
Yeah.
So if I could wave like a 2-meter rope, I would have hit world-class people in optometry, hardware engineers, software engineers. It was just an incredible time.
It's and this part of the world is unique for that. I think there is also a capacity of course, the technical talent and the ability of dreaming the impossible, but eventually also of thinking about how to make money from things, because there is so much technical capacity, if you like, in Europe, where we started with Wilby, and then. But even on the East Coast, where we are spending more and more time, in fact, we have expanded there over the last 12 months. And the natural or the instinctive entrepreneurial mindset is still a very hard muscle to kick in on the East Coast compared to when we speak with talent here on the West Coast. And still trying to understand what's the difference between the two worlds.
Yeah, it's interesting to your point. The question that was asked at Google X was not why, but why not? The mindset was, we will look at these huge ideas, and the only thing that would stop from proceeding would be physics, or that physically couldn't happen. At least in the early evaluation of the art of what's possible. So it was sort of you attracted a certain type of person. We sort of like asked those big questions. And people who are convinced to say yes, as opposed to like no. And there was a time and place, and in fact, that's what I came in to Google X, was at a time when there was this great portfolio of amazing things, self-driving cars and Google Glass and self-driving the balloons, like Loon.
I remember that as well.
Like what I do, I bring groups together, and I basically take things that are mostly working and figure out how to make money off them. That's what I do. That's kind of what I've made my career on. And I remember sitting down with Sergey and this guy Astro Teller, who's running Google X, incredible folks. And I asked them, it wasn't a rhetorical question. I said, look, we have these wonderful things which are awesome. As a human, I love that we're doing these things. But in terms of where we take these, do we want to make money from these things? Do we want to turn them into businesses? Or is there a huge brand halo where we attract the best and brightest? Like, both of those things are totally fine. But like, as far as my role potentially here, that's what I do. That's what Claire Hughes Johnson does. She took cars, I took the wearables.
I see.
And that was very much a part of the journey with Google X.
Was that a question because resources are, practically unlimited at Google? Well, you can dream to have that kind of funding, but after a while they were saying, hold on a second, this has to make sense from a balance sheet perspective, or were they forced into this process? Or?
It's a very interesting question. There started to be some question mark because the amount of money that was being spent across this, even for Google standards, was getting really significant. So I saw that intuitively, but it was really more of like, hey, I had some choices to make in terms of what my career. I just didn't want to waste any time. Right. Because I can't contribute to how the physics of how the balloon works. I can help map a market, go build a team, and go take the market. But yeah, you're quite right. Over time, the CFO did put increasing pressure to basically get a return. And the best logical way is to do what Waymo's doing and do what Wearables had the chance to do.
What did the team look like at the time that you were coming in? Because one thing is to come up, pay a bunch of very talented technical people to come together and solve the thing.
Yeah.
But another thing is to start an organization off the back of that know-how and...
Well, there wasn't an organization to do monetization.
Exactly.
Right, to be clear. There was a small team that was doing customer support.
Okay.
Because there was early program. But I would also caution that almost Google is the exception that proves the rule. The way they were going about it was very Google specific.
Yeah.
And part of the problem was having unlimited resources. They're pursuing 3 different product lines with Wearables at the time.
Yeah.
And that there's the expression, creativity loves constraint, and I believe it. But you have to constrain and make choices.
Yeah.
This is what makes startups
Forcing
so
mechanism.
magical.
Yeah, of course.
But so there wasn't really any. But what we were trying to do was trying to structure partnerships, in this case with Luxottica, but more generally with other developers, to basically, hey, why don't we build a base layer? Think of what Android is. It's an operating system. And there's now millions and millions, if not tens of millions, of developers that take it the next mile. That was the vision that we had for, in this case, Google Glass. Google Glass was 10, 15 years ahead of its time.
Yeah.
As tends to happen in technology.
Yeah, of course. When we last met, you had just finished trying to work out Evernote, if I remember right, and you were recruited by the investors themselves, if I remember right, by the VCs to do that. You have now started a new role, which is different kind of setup.
I've had many roles since then, so I feel like I've had many chapters, but happy to.
Is solving problems part of your, do you enjoy because you come in and, the meal is sort of half cooked, or what do you do? You break them down, and
I've tried everything, and I think it's interesting. People talk about follow your passion. I think it's kind of garbage. I think you have to find your passion, find what you're good at, and refine it over time. And the way that I've found that works is you have to experiment.
Yeah.
It's okay, I've done everything from starting companies from scratch myself, all the way up to running multi-billion-dollar companies.
Yeah.
Like Google Canada was a $2 billion business. And a whole bunch of stuff in between. I've done turnarounds. Evernote was a turnaround. It was okay, it had created a category, it could do no wrong until it could do no right. That's the time I came in. As a first-time CEO, you sometimes come into some messy situations, and that was one of them. I had a lot of challenges, like existential challenges. And I've done global roles. So I've been really fortunate to be in a lot of different situations. And knowing what I love, taking something that mostly works and then making it much better. So sometimes not 0 to 1. That's not what I'm great at.
Yeah.
Others are far greater at that than I am. Taking it from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, that's what I'm great at, and that's what I like to do.
What is if there was one thing that you could name as that makes the difference in growing the organization after the one? What
well, it always comes down to the team. But if I abstract for a second, there's an expression that says first-time founders worry about product market fit, first and foremost, and then second-time founders worry about distribution, right? Yeah. You need product market fit, period. If you don't have product market fit, solving a real problem that the world needs solving, then you're dead in the water. Yeah. There's nothing. You have to be able to ground everything in a real solution to a real problem. But what I've learned is once you get that, the next thing is how do you take the market? That's how do you get distribution? How do you make people aware of your product, and then have a model that compiles to say, right, it's going to take this long to sell. We're going to need a funnel that looks like this for every one sale. It's probably need, somewhere like 5 to 10 different prospects that are really qualified. So it really comes down to that when I think about it. But ultimately, it is the team. It's culture and team that is persistent throughout the entire journey. And I'm happy to unpack that a bit with you.
Big time. In fact, on the team front, yes, just to dive deeper into the distribution aspect. So if you were to relate that to, say that we're taking a hard piece of technology that is addressing a real market, and then you're looking at marketing it, and there is no real market there, and you're competing against some huge players, some established medical devices companies, therapeutics companies, or engineering companies, and you're trying to build a roadmap towards, again, the commercial impossible almost. I know it's tough, or and I don't want to put you on the spot, but what is it that a founder, a first-time founder, could be doing better at that stage?
Yeah, I think it's really important. As I said, like it's not about a big long roadmap. Roadmaps are useless in the beginning, right? It's more about really an acute problem that needs to be solved, and then having a unique perspective on how to solve it, and then having an articulated vision for a better world, right? And that's important because you want to attract capital, you want to attract team, and you have to have an articulation that says, this is the world I see. This is a world that's going to be better, right? That is worthy of chasing. And it's because we're solving this problem right here. And this is how a unique insight as to how we're going to solve it. So, okay, that's interesting. Where to from there? I like to say think big, start small, right? You have to have a big vision that's inspiring, that gets people fired up. And then you have to be thinking possibly small, which sounds weird and counterintuitive. But you really want to find the smallest little piece to a wedge to insert, so you can get traction and get rapid iteration and feedback. So that's a mindset to start. But then you also need a team that's comfortable and confident to say, look, there's no roadmap. This is going to be like we're just going to navigate our way through the woods here and iterate and be wrong a lot. In fact, be wrong 80 to 90% of the time. Finding that 5 to 10% that is working, and taking that nugget and then rinsing and repeating. That's the mindset you have to have.
Just from that, I relate to, this morning I was on the phone with one of the cohort members, so we're running class 13 of our bootcamp program.
Cool, congrats.
Thank you. We're just taking, so in effect these are scientists who are just about to become founders, so leaving academia for good as postdoc researchers, so they're technically very, very viable. And specifically I'm thinking of a team that has the unusual match between one of the founders has the big vision and the other one is very technical, and so the big vision is always talking about this northern star, this is what we can achieve and we will, which is quite rare among scientists. So the fact that he has it, I'm very, very happy about. But this morning thankfully I repeated, probably not as sophisticated as you said just now, but just I prompted him to look for that nugget that you talked about. So that basically means surrounding yourself with people that can kind of be the second in line as you are cutting through the forest. And
I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you just described there. So you do need all these conditions to be true. It's very rare to have them in one person. When that happens, that's magic, and but that's not I don't think it's practical. You do need someone who thinks really, really big. You do need someone who can be grounded in reality and operating rigor. You can't afford to hire specialists. You have to have people that are going to wear lots of different hats and have the mindset like I was describing. So that's how I think about it. And as for that thinking small, you're going to be wrong to start. Like if it were easy, someone else would have already done it. So the idea of being small is that you can get through iterations and cycles. It's an experiment. It's a scientific process, right? It's like, what's your hypothesis? What is it? Run the process to understand. Use your judgment to make sure you're not just doing experiments for their own sake, but ones that are going to actually move you forward faster. So that does take people who are willing to just pick up and do whatever's necessary to figure out if that hypothesis is true or false.
Can you maintain that spirit when you're a larger organization, say Google, $2 billion in revenue? After a while, you create different teams? Or?
It's the question, right? It becomes, and part of why I'm back at a smaller company, it's much more fulfilling for me personally to have more velocity. And when I say velocity, it's speed times direction. If you think of physics, right? It's not, everyone talks about just go fast, move fast and break things. It's like, I don't buy that. Like if you're going fast in the wrong direction, then you're going in the wrong direction, and you're not having any velocity against, what really matters. So I think that's important. People often forget that. The direction part matters as much as the speed part. Okay, so that's one part. But like that, so that's where I would suggest people do start, is like being really intentional about the direction.
The direction. And the way
it becomes really hard, to your point, as you get larger, for a whole bunch of good and bad reasons. It just becomes a communication problem, as much as it is, when you start to get lots of different humans with lots of different motivations. politics can creep in and kill companies. So I think it's much easier to keep that at a smaller thing. Look, Google at this pace, it's laughable how slow they are in terms of their execution velocity. It's embarrassing, actually. They have all this wonderful talent, and it just really becomes hard for them to go from A to B. ChatGPT and OpenAI have really woken them up. So I applaud their response to that, and they're a good customer and a good partner of ours. So we're excited to hear them, see them wake up, and we want them to succeed. But it's really the pace of velocity of these large companies is really, very slow.
That's a great insight on the vendor-buyer relationship, because now you're on the side of selling product to a tech company like Google. And the politics that you can imagine at Google is probably similar in pharma companies that I find myself negotiating against, and so your interaction with them is frustrating from the point of view of the speed at which they're making decisions, or the instability of the contractual relationship.
I think, sure, I'd like to move faster and with higher velocity than slower. That's always going to be true. That's not necessarily the issue. It's Google Cloud and Snowflake and Databricks and Microsoft, all these different clouds. They need showcases. They need people to take this wonderful infrastructure and showcase to the world what's possible. They're going to need partners to basically showcase and then bring that last mile of value to the market. So just basically anything that detracts from that, I get frustrated with, right? Because it's like, that's what we should be solving for, to solve value for the end users, people who are using these products. And sometimes people can get distorted about, like, Game of Thrones, who's winning at any particular time. And that's what I get a little frustrated with. But, like, look, they play a very valuable role to play in the world, just like the large pharma companies would, I'm sure. They have the data, they have resources, they have the experience that can and will be valuable for a partner.
It's incredible how so as a non-scientist, and I've never built a science company in my life. I came in as an operator, as a former attorney, and I was just frustrated over how too few research projects were being commercialized out of academia. So I tried to figure out that piece. And then as I was speaking with legacy operators from pharma or from engineering, they were almost making it look as if there is a specific recipe book that applies for science commercialization that is different from traditional business that you would find, for example, in traditional tech. And everything that you said now very much relates with what actually applies to our science companies. So I find it very valuable, especially once this is up on our platform, for them to see that actually the lessons are not just from, there's this spin out from my department that did it this way, I need to replicate that recipe, but actually I could take inspiration from all different other sectors around me that have managed to make money out of a product. And just tying things, because we're touching on such pivotal pieces here for new founders. I don't want to let go of the piece around team. And I know that it may not be relevant for what you're doing now, but if you mentioned starting businesses and as a founder. And if you were to think about your first hires, so you've got your first check from investors, and you're thinking, okay, I now need people to do this on the product side, but you are at the point of selection and recruiting. Besides the technical capacity, is there something that you'd be looking for that is pivotal to increasing the value of the company?
Yeah, I think there are many things, of course, but the things I'd place a premium on, aside from what I've already mentioned, like, you have to be willing to just do almost whatever it takes, and wear lots of different hats, and be even if you're not great at you're world class at any one of them. That's a given in the early stages. But the two I would point out would be insight and execution. And what I mean by insight is the ability to study a landscape, study a market, really understand what the problem is, and not just come up with dull sort of generalities, but sharp insights. That's a real skill that is especially important in the early days, because you really want to not just be doing sort of what everyone else is doing. You want to have a differentiated and sharp insight that says, this is how we see the market. So that when you're trying to compete against a much larger player or more established player, you don't get checklisted to death. And what I mean by that is like, oh, all these features, oh, look at all these features. And like, you go to sell to somebody, it's like, oh, well, do you have these 20 things? The answer is always going to be no. Yeah. But it's like, do you have an insight as to which one or two of those things really matter? Yeah. Many of those things don't matter. Yeah. So the premium on insight is to be able to do that, to pierce through and say, look, it's this and this that really matter. These two features right here. Stripe did this brilliantly in attacking the payments market. Yeah. They basically said it's this multi-country remittance. I won't get into bore you with the details, but it's like they said that's really valuable to what we're seeing. And it's not the 30 other things. It's this and this. Is that right? And for the market they chose, that was absolutely true. So they had like a 3 to 4 or 5 times better solution for the 1 or 2 features that mattered. That's a function of having really keen insight and the courage and the nose to chase it. And that's the first part. And the execution is kind of more what it seems like. It's like, don't confuse activity for progress, right? It's about really, really picking your spots and then getting shit done. Like it being relentless, both in terms of asking people for business, asking people to to follow them if you're really in the exploratory phase. Yeah. So execution is at a premium.
On the insight front, and I'll go back to the attracting talent that can help you with that at that particular stage. So would you be looking as first, you're starting a business and you're bringing on board the first few members of the team. Are you looking for people that trust you blindly or are able to add color to your insight or are able to read signals in the same way that you can and connect the dots?
Well, if I understand your question correctly, like I think you always want to be looking for, there's so much ground to cover in your early day, always, but especially in the early days. You want to find people who are different than you, right? Who bring something unique and different. Okay. So that together, sometimes I liken it to like an orchestra, if you're in music, or even if you're having a dinner party. Yeah. You know, we've all been to dinner parties where there's kind of all the same type of people, and it's kind of boring. Yeah. At least I find. You want to have different people, and you kind of have the alchemy that works. Same with the company. Yeah. You want to have a nice combination of skill sets, and then you kind of know it when you see it, when you actually start to ask good questions in an interview. I'll tell you, an interview this last week I was interviewing a product person, and it was like we had 2 candidates who otherwise had very good early track records. These are earlier in their careers. But when I asked this version of insight question, one person was, well, I'd read reports. I'd go hire this person, this company over here, and I'd read reports, and we would. And the other candidate was, well, I just go to the factory and I would. Actually, this is what he actually did. I interviewed all these people, right? Because what they had is a similar problem. What we're talking about was like they built this horizontal thing, right? That sort of solved many little problems. Yeah. But they honed in on and they found 1 or 2. And how did they get there? Is this resourceful guy who basically said, I'm just going to go spend time talking to the people who are running plants. Yeah. In this case, it was an industrial kind of engineering thing. But guess who I thought more of, right? It's not even close. Yeah. Right? You want that person who's just going to basically bring themselves as close to the problem as possible by asking good questions, but then not using proxies. Yeah. Go right to the source and talk to people.
Which is the core of an entrepreneurial spirit, right?
Totally. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, even though you're doing a job for a company that may not be yours, but you're applying. Yeah. You want the truth, right? You don't want. You want to understand what are the. It's comparable to some of the work that we're doing right now in the cohort around customer discovery and interviewing your potential customers and really asking the tough questions, even without pitching your product, right? Trying to understand what is your pain point.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in Steve Blank and the four steps of the epiphany, and the customer discovery comes from his work in Lean Startup, some combination of those. But it's like get out of the building is what he said. Like you got to get out. You got to do 10 calls a day or a week or whatever, depending on the size of the team and the problem. But like Yeah, and then there's the other book we call it's the mom test, right? If you ask your mom what she thinks of you, she's going to say nice things about you.
Yeah.
So you got to push past that. You're not seeking affirmation.
Yeah.
You want affirmation, go get a dog, right? And like that dog will give you all the affirmation you want.
This may be our caption for for today's chat.
Okay, well, fantastic. I'm thinking amazing because my dog's getting groomed right now. But no, you're seeking, as you said, truth. Yeah. It's like I don't know if I'm dating myself. I used to love the X-Files, right? And the mantra was the truth is out there. Yeah. The truth is out there. You just got to go seek it, and you got to uncover it and dig a lot to get it. But that's your job. Customer discovery is like you want to find those what he calls early evangelicals, right? Yeah. Those people who have the problem. And they've even taken strides to try and cobble together a non-scalable solution. Those are the people you want, and you want to go find them, and they have to be willing to pay you, which is another thing. That's a question that people sometimes struggle to ask. Like, would you pay for this? Yeah. Right.
Of course.
What you want is the person metaphorically.
Yeah, handing over something.
Like, here's my credit card. Like, if you could give this to me right now, I'd be willing to give you money for it. Yeah. That's when you know you've found those early evangelical people.
Yeah, which is a tough one to apply in science because if you're selling anything that has to do with a biotech platform or molecule, you're speaking probably with 4 or 5 pharma companies and they've got their own system. So, otherwise you could end up building for 6-7 years something that eventually has no market, and then you've wasted everybody's time, including yours.
Yeah. So you got to find those proxies, those early leading, whatever the meta. I'm using, of course, like maybe that would be more of a consumer or even an enterprise example where people like have budgets and they're willing to spend on problems. But what is the equivalent that shows like the metaphorical? I'm willing to move on this right now, and that might take a different shape and form. I'm not as familiar with the nuances.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a tough part. And in fact, it's down to us that we're trying to invent a new playbook whereby instead of relying on pharma telling us what to build, which is how it's gone so far, is ourselves doing a better job than R&D teams and BD teams at pharma at figuring out how to improve their existing products by speaking with patients or with those that have the disease. And so it's
that's interesting.
It's going to the first principle that we're talking about now about customer discovery.
But it's interesting. So people have and by the way, I'm going to say this out loud, is like people need to get okay with sales. Sales has a very people have the wrong impression of what sales really is.
What is sales?
Well, it's sort of what we're talking about here is actually actively seeking out who the customer is. What problem do they have? And then sales is the ability to articulate that problem in a way that's at least as good as the customer or the prospect themselves, if not better. You need to really marinate on that problem. And your job isn't to try and sell them or try to convince them to do something against their will. You're trying to solve that problem. And often that takes what's called the challenger mindset. There's a whole book called The Challenger Seller. Okay. And the challenger seller is someone who, again, studies the problem. Say, here's the problem, and they understand it. Here are different avenues or alternatives to solve that problem. And there's no one way to do things. There's many ways to do things. But here is, let me educate you. You're an expert on the problem. I need to get parity, at least understand that problem. But I'm going to help you be a coach, be a guide, be a muse, to say, look, here are the different ways in which you could solve it. And you got to challenge their thinking. You got to challenge if they're thinking about it too narrowly. The best sellers are those who can basically open up their minds to an alternative, and then say, this is better for these reasons. Here's a world that's better. Come with me on this journey. And then you also need what I call rational drowning. Rational drowning means, here's the kind of ROI type thing, right? It's going to save you this much time or money, or it's going to be better in a material and quantifiable way. And the best companies have what's called hard ROI, because you can say we're going to either replace this equipment or this process or these people. This investment is going to allow you to generate an ROI. And not always is that possible, but then a soft ROI is good too. Actually, many of the companies that have been successful have been a part of our soft ROIs, like this company Glean, which is wildly successful. We're not necessarily replacing things. We're just making people more efficient and more effective in their jobs. So that's a soft ROI. We would basically say, look, we're saving all these people hours a week. And that was all true. And it worked even though it was a soft ROI. But you have to do that rational drawing. You have to do that math for them. So here's the vision, here's the problem, here's different alternatives to solve it. Let me confidently guide you through this process. Oh, and by the way, here's our solution. This is how we think it's better. Not for everyone, but for these people right here with this type of problem and this mindset, we are better. And here's how we quantify it. Any questions?
So precious. It's hard work, especially if you are a scientist where you've come from a point of view where your sales process is based on not open iterations and conversations because you're publishing and you want the publishing to be perfect. And it's peer reviewed, and then your reputation depends on the quality of that work. And then when you're asking for anything that is money-like, it's a grant to an administrator of a NIH, which doesn't really judge your ability to generate soft ROIs. Like it's more about, this seems like a worthwhile exploration. And instead, they're thrown into a world whereby they need to be very methodical in having these kind of conversations and being wrong as well. Openly wrong.
There's some parallels there, though, right? The rigor that goes into the process you're describing is immense. And what I'm also just wrap around this challenger selling, this mindset is it's actually a scientific process. It's like it's actually not some mysterious voodoo. No, it literally is a process that says like you do this, you discover like, and those who have that mindset, that scientific.
I will refer the book to the in the comments, but great challenger mindset you said,
the challenger sale, I think it's called.
Okay. So that's perhaps the only. I think that before we make any investment in any company, we want to see a serious commitment to doing this properly. The answer doesn't have to be perfect, but it's the ability of having, conducting that process and getting to an outcome that affects your short-term decisions. Because
I think that's right. And like, just to reiterate, like, the process is required because even the best teams in the world get this right maybe 20-30% of the time off the bat.
Wow, yeah.
It's just
crazy.
So why is agility and this agile mindset so important? Because like that's just the fact. Right? If you take the best software teams, even at scale, they're getting it right 20, 30, maybe if they're incredible and they know they're 40% of the time. They're gonna be wrong. So what do you do with that? you got to take the nugget, back to that insight. You got to figure out what that insight is, and then you got to just try a different approach. And you're constantly doing that. And it's not just like, I don't subscribe to this, well, everything's just an experiment. We just A/B test the shit out of everything. That's garbage. No, you need to use your judgment. You need to say, no, this is where we're going to really experiment and run. Because it's too, opportunity cost is too high. It's too expensive to run experiments. You got to pick your spots and really use it in the appropriate way. But no, just to set the expectation right now, you're going to be wrong 2/3 of the time minimum. It's just the way the world works. If you're doing something meaningful, by the way, like if you're doing something silly, then probably isn't worth doing anyways.
Are you experimenting right now in your current role, or are you more on the side of selling?
Always. We're thinking about. It's become a challenger. Like a lot of the stuff I'm working with, I'm dealing with a lot of retailers or a lot of larger companies. We're dealing with enterprises, and so as part of it is, they've been used to doing things the same way for a long time. And the deeper you go into the organization, the more fossilized that is. So you're actually it's actually change management. It's so objectively obvious to most people that there's better ways to do it. Like AI is the biggest thing that's happened in my lifetime. Technology, that's all the hype is real in my mind. Like it is that transformative, and yet when the rubber hits the road, I'm like I like to kind of score my database this way. I don't want to send direct mail on the other side, and I want to have my little code to put in against. It's like, okay, that's the way we've been doing it for 30 years. Like we can keep doing it for 31. There's a far better way to do things and treat customers in different ways and deliver better experiences. Why are you sending everyone the same thing? It's like, so we're experimenting with, okay, what does that look like? What does that look like if we went all the way down to say, hey, what if we treated every, Golden State Warriors fan differently? Nothing to stop us from doing that. We're all different.
Right? What do you do when you're when you feel this resistance towards change within the team, how much patience and work can you put in towards showing them
It's a great
new
question.
door?
Yeah, I always say to my team, we got to meet them where they are. You can't pretend that doesn't exist. Right? Like it's like this is the way they've been doing it. So like you can just pretend it's going to exist and kind of trying to influence from the side or above. I mean, it doesn't work that way. So you got to meet them where they are, and you got to show them. You got to show them a better path. And the other tactic I found that works is you got to find the type of person. To call them a change maker, call them whatever, shit disturber, whatever term you want to apply to them.
Shit stir.
You want to find people who aren't okay with the status quo and are ambitious.
Yeah.
Right. Early days at Google, like it's so interesting, right? People think, oh, let's go back 10, 15 years ago, and you think that Google was just going to be obviously such a success and going to be as transformative. That was not the case. Like when we were there, it was like Google was a small little rounding error of people's advertising budget. So we had to find the people who could see that this is clearly superior to a newspaper ad or clearly superior to a radio ad. And we found those people. And we said, hey, like, come on this journey with us. We think it's really real. So how do you invest in those people? All industries have these people. They do. Like they're usually early in their careers. Not always, but they're usually early in their careers. They got piss and vinegar. They're on a mission to make a difference. This is certainly true in the scientific world. And they're not going to just let bureaucracy and the way we've always done things be an excuse for them to stop. They're going to keep going. So you want to find those people and you want to partner with them right, on this journey. That's really probably the single biggest tactic I think you can do. I found as a hack that has worked out well.
Super, super valuable. Because the instinct of, in academia, you generally recruit to save costs. So you recruit PhDs and students from within the same university, and you see that as an advantage. And then you are spearheading the project almost as if you are the tip of the diamond or the pyramid. And then everybody else has to fall in line with your direction because you're not accountable towards generating revenue or products.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so that mindset really is opposite towards I want to surround myself with other people that are aligned in breaking stuff and are dissatisfied. And so we're starting to see new models of doing research coming out, which are not startups, so they're not ventures yet, they're not commercializing a specific product, but they are not satisfied with the way that academia works. And so they're like independent research groups that are maybe funded by some of the big guys here in the Bay Area through a grant. And they are moving much faster. Yesterday I was having a chat with Arcadia Science, which is backed by a big crypto entrepreneur. And they are developing a novel playbook. So I sense that all of this experience that you have been sharing is in effect has been converted into this new kind of science companies that we are developing, but also research groups outside of academia.
Well, when that's interesting. That's news to me, but that doesn't totally surprise me. These change makers, these people who want this are so impatient to make a difference, are so valuable. The only caution I'd give is you need more than one, and then you also, when you really succeed, you actually have a coalition. You build a coalition, so it's not just one. In selling and go-to-market context, we talk about multi-threading. And multi-threading means you get everyone from a very senior executive all the way down to the people using a product. And I think that can be applicable here is you want those change makers to go and not just cause a ruckus for its own sake. No, you want them to be your partner, riding shotgun with you, to paint that picture and be persistent and really punch through any of the resistance that comes. But you also want them, if they're really good, to basically help you inform the map. You know, if this were like an energy company looking for oil, weird. You want to have like the geological person who's basically shooting the seismic down to then have a high resolution map of what's going on under there, so you know where the oil or the gas or whatever resource you're looking for is. Same is true inside of a company. You want to know how decisions get taken, and it's not always obvious. Maybe in science it is, but most places it's not. There's informal relationships, there's informal pockets of power that aren't intuitive, so you want to go and find those out. And then you want to build a coalition of these people to basically say, hey, we believe in this world. And then when you really get it right, you create a sense of inevitability that's going to happen. It's like, of course, like why would we do it that way when this way is so clearly superior for this, and this reason?
This concept is quite foreign to traditional science companies where, in effect, there are always board dramas and investors, they come in hard in dictating what the governance structure is, and committees and scientific boards. And in effect, the CEO is not actually a person that is capable of taking decisions alone, but also is not really there to develop a rapport with the different individuals and pick signals. It's more about reporting. It's almost like an individual who's reporting to oversight, and that is even at the earliest of stages. If you are going down the traditional route, you're diluting a lot with very legacy investors. So that's exactly what we're trying to disrupt, and that's why everything that you're mentioning here, it's very important because it kind of manifests a different kind of company and company culture that you could build if you are aware of this from the day that you're getting started.
Well, your work is very important because like that path that you're describing, it can work, but the odds, again, this is all, we're not dealing in deterministic stuff. Like this is, I think, part of the challenge. Science can often be deterministic. The world of innovation in business is probabilistic. It just, and it's important when we think about plans and strategies and all this crap. It's like, oh my gosh, like when people have deterministic strategies 3 and 5 years out, I just like want to throw up because it's like, that's not the way the world works. Your job is to say, what are the critical few things that have to be true in order for this shiny vision of the world to come true? And you're going to be wrong, so you need to iterate. But you need to have like, okay, great, what does that mean, right? Where are we going to play? How are we going to win? What are the capabilities that we need? And then how do we know? How do we track all this stuff? Like that's strategy to me and the set of choices, not some 3,000-page document. That's garbage. Or even 30-page document, right? That's why I think the work you're doing is important. You're pushing forward and through because you want to have founders and early members of teams have a huge stake, not some diluted stake, a huge stake. And you have to empower them because, look, governance structures, I sit on boards and so forth, and there's a very important role that boards play. Let me be clear. At the same time, the board's job is not to be engaged in the day-to-day details of the business. And if you're not engaged in the day-to-day details of the business, then those iteration cycles we're talking about don't happen. It's just too slow. And you're basically lowering the probability of success when obviously you're trying to do the opposite because the odds of success are low to begin with.
There's an entire new chapter that we could discuss around boards and the value of them. But
I'd love to do that sometime.
I would love to hear it, and maybe we could do it together as a second session. But I am also conscious of the time, Chris. I think we've got about a minute. If I read your watch upside down, right?
We're good.
How does Chris think about career? In your role, you come in, you change things, you improve them, and then typically you have been poached or recruited elsewhere. Do you see your work as chapters, or do you see yourself ever as perhaps with this company growing to the end of time? How do you work?
I'm 30 years into my career, so it's very different.
I wouldn't have said.
No. So I think it depends on where you are in your career. Like I think there's this idealized world, and when you can find it, I would say seize it. And if it's your life's work to solve a particular problem, I found that like the closer I am to problems I've actually experienced, the more authentic I can be about leaning in and really trying to make a difference. Like, look, I lost my mom to brain cancer, which was just like, she was really young. She was in the early 60s, and it was like, that sucks. And I'm going to do something about that. And so there are many years when I was chasing after that with some people, and I grabbed some people, amazing researchers who become friends of mine to this day. And that felt different to me. And maybe not need to be that extreme in terms of like a medical or health thing that you've experienced, but like some connection to the problem so that it's meaningful that it's solved is important at any stage if you're really going to go do your life's work kind of thing. So I would love for them to be, for there to be situations where that's the arc. That hasn't been my lived experience in terms of my career, but I think that's more normal than not. Yeah. Where you're on that discovery to find out what you're truly passionate about, find out especially what you're good at, right? Because you can't be good at everything, but try and find that. And then when you start to build expertise, that's great. And the only way you do that is by experimenting, exposing yourself to different things, and then being honest and being self-aware, surrounding yourself with mentors who can point out and coach you and push you into areas. I've been super fortunate because like people see potential in me sometimes at different times that I wouldn't have seen it, and like that's how you grow, right? You push yourself into uncomfortable situations, and that's where the growth really happens. But I guess my through line of all this is like never stop learning, right? Like be humble, self-aware, because like if you don't, then like the feedback cycles, if they exist, they take too long. And by the way, we're living in such a fascinating time, right? It's just like amazing. There's so much great stuff happening. Like part of the reason I jumped back into a full-time operating job is because like I just don't want to be investing and sitting on boards. Like maybe there's a time in my life when I'll do that.
It's not the time to sit down because things are moving so quickly. You mentioned AI and it's unbelievable that outside of the Bay Area there are still, there's a lot of criticism about the fact that this is not truly a revolution and that AI is not going to be changing things, and undoubtedly is going to be changing things in science. I can see that as a pivotal tool. But anyhow, it's great to hear how humble you are, even after having done all sorts of different jobs in different regions, and still seeking the thrill of solving problems, because that's the exciting piece for you, right? To come in.
If you're not solving problems, I think it was window dressing, right? Like, I don't know. So thank you. You're very kind to say that.
Yeah, great to see you, Chris.
You too.
I'd love another session when I'm back in the Bay Area.
Let's do it.
Yeah.